4, 3, 2, 1. Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Northfield, Vermont. I'm live here in Bean Studios, the center of the universe. No, just kidding, of course. And I have a very special guest today. I have Gerald Malloy, and Gerald is running against Bernie Sanders, incumbent of a billion years, for U.S. Senate. So welcome, Gerald. Thank you so much for making the travel up here today, and welcome here. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you for having me on the show. Thank you for doing this show and bringing out a different perspective to all Vermonters, and thank you also to Guy Page for Vermont Daily Chronicle. But it's great to be here. The campaign's going fantastic. I can tell you a lot of stories about it. Just spent 3 days going door to door in Burlington.
Wow.
Very encouraging.
Tell us about it.
Yeah, so
That's incredible.
I did several streets in New North, and met a ton of folks. Very encouraging for the most part. I got some folks that are, I'm a Bernie fan, not going to change. Okay,
sure.
But a lot of folks are. Well, you know what? Frankly, most Vermonters are upset about the status of Vermont. Like our governor, Republican governor, talks about, it has become unaffordable. It's unsafe. People are leaving. And going around Burlington, I just left. It's still a little rainy up there, but I just left a homeless area down right next to Lake Champlain, kind of down the road a little bit.
By the waterfront there.
Okay.
Yeah,
kind of way to keep going down in the back, and a bunch of tents out there. I met a person very upset with how Vermont's treating him, and then even, on College Street, about a block and a half from the City Hall and City Hall Plaza there, or Park, a couple of days ago, whole bunch of folks just hanging out on these church steps near the Fletcher Free Library, and you clearly see, I'm sure you've seen it, the droop, the hangover, drugs, fentanyl.
What drug is that? Is that
I think it's fentanyl.
Fentanyl or xylazine, maybe?
I think it's mostly fentanyl coming in from. I'm sure there's all different kinds, but I think it's mostly fentanyl coming in primarily through our southern border, wide open, and our northern border. You probably saw that recent report about the Swanton sector.
Yes, I did.
With the 10 months equal to the previous 10 years for illegal apprehensions and known suspected terrorists off the charts. So,
did you see the story that James O'Keefe was detained? James O'Keefe, he was detained in Jericho as part of this kind of trying to expose the border crisis ultimately. And I think part of the reason why he was probably here, I don't know the full details yet. Nobody does. It's not just the southern border. Okay. People seem to not be picking up on that. I did see that piece of the Swanton sector there, where they call it the Swanton corridor, maybe? Is that what you said?
Yeah, well, CBP, but I think it was the Swanton sector, but it's actually part of New York, all of Vermont, part of New Hampshire. It's 295 miles wide.
Okay.
And like I mentioned, and this was maybe a month ago, but they, 2024 up to September, they had apprehended the same number of illegal apprehensions, immigrants trying to come in, as the previous 10 years. So, and I can tell you, I worked with DHS a long time ago, 17 years ago, and the border was out of control at that point, drugs and crime. But now it is mostly fentanyl coming in. It's killing Americans. It's ruining cities and towns and families across America. And I can tell you, great impact, negative impact here across Vermont. And I mean, frankly, Burlington, Rutland, Brattleboro, Bennington, St. Johnsbury, they're all in trouble. Crime and drugs. I think the drugs is kind of the root of it, and the crime that comes from that. And I'm not seeing it. Well, frankly, it's been career politicians kicking that border security can down the road for way too long. It's impacting our whole economy. And like I said, unfortunately, I think sooner or later, folks are going to have a family member or someone they know die from a fentanyl overdose, for whatever reason.
Couldn't be more true.
Takes that much.
Yeah.
So that's one of the reasons I'm running. And, I decided to run in 22. I didn't like the direction we were going in. We've got and we were just talking about it. It's kind of amazing to me to watch the last couple of years. We have a very popular Republican governor. He's going to win again, 70% plus. And, the Vermonters are electing him as the top government official here in Vermont, but we have a supermajority that ignores him. And the 12 of his vetoes that have been overridden, I certainly hope Vermonters realize they're not being represented. That's not a legislature that's representing the best interests of Vermont, especially when you get that new tax bill or the clean heat standard or the payroll tax. That's some kind of agenda or ideas, but it's not the general welfare of the people of Vermont. It's like I said, an agenda. So we need change.
Sure.
We need balance, and I think it's coming. Because like I said, I started off in New North. That was very positive. A few exceptions. I could even talk more
I commend you a lot for going to do that. Seriously, because I've had similar experiences in Montpelier, and it's a hard thing to do.
I tell you one thing that maybe I shouldn't even say this, but I'm just gonna anyway.
Go ahead.
I'm going up and down streets in New North, and there's one house, and it's got several very, very, very anti-Trump
signage and
right on the front lawn,
flags and what. Yeah.
A couple of them mentioned racism and fascism, and I'm like, I was just thinking, I was like, well, what if somebody did that for the other main presidential candidate? I mean, people would have their hair on fire if something like that would happen.
Sure.
You know what I mean? So there's a lot of rhetoric, and we just talked about the 2 assassination attempts.
Did you ask them about that?
No, I dropped off a card. The lady was pleasant.
Yeah.
She's like, oh, thanks, because I went to her and knocked on the door. I gave her 2 cards, one with my pledge on it, and another with the little ones that my wife did.
Sure.
Get the little Vermont maple bread recipe in the back, and do the phone thing and learn my whole life and platform right there. But but she was very nice, very pleasant. I didn't make any comments. I don't want to get into this huge thing. But,
sure.
But it's kind of probably a double standard in there somewhere.
Well, it's tough. It's tough.
The rhetoric that we were just talking about, the 2 assassination attempts. There's nowhere that doesn't, not in America. That violence is not acceptable. But I think folks keep saying things that aren't true, and folks with mental health issues, that gets in there, and next thing you know, you got a guy in Florida with an AK, or what happened out in Butler, Pennsylvania, and our president's President Trump is, grace of God, he's still here.
Yeah.
No,
and I think it's interesting because there's a lot of people that, when you look around the United States right now, you go into, just take a local example here with Burlington. I went up and I did interviews when I first started working with Guy Page. I was doing street interviews up in Burlington, interviewing the homeless people, interviewing students, and it's pretty rough out there, right? And then you look, and that's just in Burlington, and you go around the rest of the country to Pennsylvania, down in Philadelphia, Boston, New York City, Washington, D.C. All these places are full of homeless people and people on drugs. And then when you look at them you have teams of people trying to kill the presidential nominee in the Republican Party. I think a lot of people are like, what is going on in this country? Right. Where are we headed here, folks?
We're headed in a very bad direction, and I hope folks realize all the places you just mentioned are blue cities.
Yes, they are.
And getting involved in politics, particularly the last 3 years, I think, if you go back even like 60 years, the Democrat Party kind of reimaged, rebranded itself to be the party that's going to take care of disadvantaged folks in inner cities across the country. Healthcare, education, housing, that has not happened. And I think what has happened, particularly the last several years, whatever was the Democrat Party is gone.
Yes.
It's gone. It's been hijacked by the progressive left. And we were just talking about it, a Vermont state senator, going into Montpelier and seeing that there isn't the discussion and collaboration and development of a reasonable solution. It's the blinders are on. The progressive left like the treatment of the governor. 12 vetoes overridden. And the results are where those blue cities, including Burlington,
that's right,
are right now. So I hope Vermonters, talk about change and balance. The Republican Party talks about fiscal responsibility and less government. We certainly don't need more and more and more and more, because what that is more and more spending and taxes, more and more and more. And that kind of goes into the whole federal, national debt, coming up on $36 trillion.
That's insane.
It is insane, and
it's terrifying.
It should be because it's about to. It's endangering our entire economy. We're at about 125% of the GDP. So that's all the goods and services. The entire United States in a year is,
that's scary.
That's 125% of that. We're going to pay $900 billion just next year just to cover the debt. And another thing that's been getting kicked down the road forever by career politicians is the Social Security social program. And I'm not in favor of changing it. I'm not in favor of changing the age, reducing it. But the fact is, it's insolvent. It's on a path where older folks, a lot of them in Vermont, are going to get whatever the number is, 77 to 75% of what they've been getting here in the not too distant future. So I think it's time to. It kind of goes back to career politicians not making tough decisions, and they kind of want to just go in and get reelected. They won't make those tough decisions to include a balanced budget. Yeah, I know that's both sides, but I think the Republican Party will do the work to get there. As I know the Democrat progressives won't.
No, and I think it's that's one of those issues when I look at the national scene and the Republican Party nationally as a whole. We were talking a little bit about the RNC and going to that, what that was like. But I will say, I do have some criticisms of I'm sure you do too, of the way the National Party is handling some of the choices that they're making in Washington D.C. And maybe I do see them as much as a problem as maybe not as much as a problem as the Democrats and progressives. Mm-hmm. I do see some of the, I don't know, like you just hear so much out of Washington D.C. and it's so divided. And I don't know. Yeah. Can you speak to that a little bit? Like, what if you had to criticize some of the things they are up to? What would you say?
Well, the overspending. Yeah, I mean,
like that's not just a Democrat problem.
No, it's not. No, it's not. And it's a Republican problem also. It's a career politician problem. That's kind of what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
And folks get in there and they're not willing to make the tough choice. It looks good to spend on whatever it might be. I think kind of one of the things that's happening is some politicians, including my opponent, is all about taxing and spending. And he talks about healthcare and education and housing, and those have done nothing but become worse and gone up, in costs over 40 years. So I'm hoping Vermonters see that they're not getting results. In terms of the party, I mean, I could specifically, the President Trump's got some ideas on immigrants. I don't think we're going to do this, get rid of every illegal immigrant in the country. I don't think that's possible. I don't see that happening.
They'll get rid of a lot of them, but not.
He talks about tariffs a lot. I'm kind of more opposed to tariffs, although it's a tough issue because I am supportive of free, fair, open markets.
Absolutely.
And in a lot of cases, we don't have that. We have China, subsidizing industry, but the EV industry,
big time,
tremendously, which puts us immediately at a disadvantage. Flip side, talk about securing the borders. I know China's providing the precursors into Mexico that are, and then processing fentanyl and pushing it in through our open southern borders. So one of the things I've talked about many times, I call it chemical warfare. It's a synthetic opioid, but I talk about having some sanctions against China to stop that flow coming in.
Yeah.
And, I mean, for instance, if we said, okay, China, product X, A, B, C, and D aren't coming into the United States anymore, that would stop it.
Sure.
But we said we're not doing T-shirts and trinkets and toys from China anymore, or, shoes, sneakers, that would probably slow down, maybe even stop the fentanyl coming into our country. But the party, I mean, if you want to go back a little bit, I didn't think, the whole Speaker of the House issue. That wasn't
McCarthy, are you talking about?
Yeah, demonstrating unity. I think there was some things behind that. Although I've met Speaker Johnson many times, and I do like him a lot. So.
Okay. Well, the reason I ask is because I think that's kind of what I was getting at too. Is I look at some of the long-term names that have been there for a long time, like the Mitch McConnells of the world, the Lindsey Grahams. These guys, it seems like they've just been there for so long, and you just got to wonder, what are they still doing there? And, I have the same thought about Bernie Sanders. It's the same kind of idea. The reason I ask is because, we are, of course, in Vermont. It is a fairly liberal state, as you might know. And, people, I think if we can look at people down there and criticize some of them, we should be able to the other side effectively too, because
sure.
I think it's just as much about being part of the establishment and being there for so long. I mean, that's why I'm attracted to Trump, right? Because he's not that guy, and they don't own him, they don't have anything on him. So you look at a lot of the decisions you see made, and you're just like, what's driving a lot of these?
Well, I tell you, going back to the RNC. Well, actually, I'll get to the RNC.
Yeah, sure.
But I'll just tell you, I was born in Boston, Dorchester, coming up Vermont my whole life. To include Burlington while I was at West Point, but another whole story.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Vermont, I mean, it was a red state.
That's right.
It was, center right, and then at over time, 50 years plus, and Senator Leahy got in there in 74, and it's gone out. Now we're redlined on far left. Right?
I agree.
That's where we are. So there's that piece. But the interesting, the RNC. It was kind of interesting, some of the folks that were not there.
Yes, I agree.
I did want to tell you one thing that was kind of interesting to me. As you probably know, I did the roll call for Vermont, and I was very, very proud to do that. Great honor, very exciting. There was a whole lot of things that happened right around that. But when the different states were going through, he might not appreciate me saying this, but I'll say it anyways. But Senator McConnell gave Kentucky's.
Oh, really?
Yep. And he opened his mouth and got booed. You didn't hear another word he said at the RNC.
See there. That's kind of what I was... I didn't know that, but I do know that within the party...
He got about a syllable out, and then you could not hear another word that he said in that Fist Center or whatever. Yeah.
That's pretty crazy.
It's kind of interesting. But it was a great experience, and... we get it kind of out there. I mean, there was the assassination on Saturday. I got out there Sunday. On Monday, he showed up. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Like I told you, I could tell you, I left late Wednesday night. I was with Paul Dame and my wife and some other folks, and we were exiting about 11:30 at night. And I was like, I'm proud to be part of this party. This party is kind of just wants the best for America. It's not about agendas, and it's about having a strong economy and American values, and so the whole event was great. I think Thursday I really felt very, very confident about President Trump becoming the next president, and we can talk more about that. I think it's about policy. It's not about
publicity, whatever the moment is. Absolutely.
Performance in a debate. It's not I think it's about policy. But anyways, I'm frankly I'm a little concerned now. I don't know if we're even or.
I know. I saw some polling numbers too.
Yeah.
What do you think that is? I was going to ask the question framed Vermont. Like, is Vermont under a spell, if you will? But I think because you are running for United States Senate, that other half of the country, right? And I look at it like this: you have people that are so wealthy, or they're in a certain upper middle class, that a lot of these economic issues don't touch them. They're not affected by it. And then you have the other half of the Democratic Party and the progressives, where it's like they are dependent on the system in one way or another. So like that's the whole when I look at their voting populace. But what is it about, especially the ones that are here?
Yeah.
Where are they? What are they not getting? I just don't get it.
It's interesting because I engage folks all the time. I mean, I walk up in the streets all over Vermont, and there's a percentage of folks If someone identifies himself as a Bernie Sanders fan, I ask, I said, well, what has he done? But almost never do they actually want to have a conversation. It's, I'm not changing my mind, and that's it. And I will tell you, same thing with President Trump. There's a pretty good chunk of folks that when they engage me, that's the only thing they want to know is, what I think about President Trump. And I say, I think he's the right person because of policy. I mean, I go back to 2019 a lot. We had 2% inflation. We had $2 gas, $2 home heating oil. We didn't have 2 new wars. And things were going pretty well. They're not now. We have none of that now. We had 40-year high inflation. And, I have an MBA and took some economics. And, when you dump, the Biden administration, 2021, 22, dumped all this money into the economy, you're going to get inflation. And I actually think they had to have known that.
I do too.
But we got it. We got the 40-year high inflation, and we're still feeling it now. And we're carrying so much debt. I think a recession is threatening still. And Vermont with the housing and stuff. So interest rates went from 3 to 8, about 8, and they're still up in high, still more than double. So a lot of things that were done that have had very negative effects, and it's almost like it was done on purpose.
That's what I don't understand. Because how do people look at this and not say,
right?
Like they're looking at just take the local level and then we'll go to the top, right? Their property tax bill's gone up.
Right.
Their heating fuel is more expensive. The everything is more expensive with inflation. So then you look at the national level. And I'm thinking, how are they still voting for Democrats? Like, what is it about the psychology of it? Is it like Stockholm syndrome or something? Like, why don't they want to break out of this? Because it'd be so much better. Life could be so much better, I guess. That's what I don't get it.
I think, it absolutely could. And I've noted that my opponent, his ex-Twitter site, have you seen this? The banner on it reads, "The struggle continues."
Yeah.
And you know what? It's going to continue. Socialism. You talked about meeting people. Knocking on doors, come up to this couple. Long story short, U.S. citizen, PhD from Russia.
Okay.
And we had a long discussion. He talked to me about the path of socialism, and and how it will always fail.
Yeah.
And I think we're starting to see some of that because it gets down to who's going to pay for all these ideas. And my opponent's been talking about lowering or free, healthcare, housing, and education for 40 years now, and it's only become more expensive. And it is a little surprising to me that Vermonters are still buying into that because Vermont tried universal health care 10 years ago, and Governor Shumlin canceled it. He realized there's way too much cost going to be imposed, which Senator Sanders never mentions. All these other countries that have great health care have, whatever it is, 50% tax rates. So there's way too much cost. And then I think Governor Shumlin, he said it. He realized,
that's right.
Vermont doesn't have the ability to run a health care system. And that gets back into, Republican Democrat, perspective of less government and let business and commerce do things, half the speed and half the time and create competition versus government overregulation and industrial policy.
Forcing the market.
Yeah. It almost seems like they're trying to put the U.S. automobile market out of business, sort of relocate and, forcing the whole EV thing. And I've talked about that a lot. I work in technology, and so I have no qualms or nothing against developing future energy capabilities, but they have to be reliable and affordable and safe.
Sure.
And there's a lot of work to do. And then there's also the whole piece that a lot of people just kind of ignored about having the natural, rare earth, toxic rare earth metals, having those resources and having the processing capability. So when we push look to flip the switch, way too soon to transition, who we're actually benefiting is is the country that has the resources and the processing capability, which is China.
Yeah.
Who's after us.
Well,
and
I have a question for you on that, actually. Just bring it back to China. A friend of mine, were having a conversation the other day. They're saying that China is collecting United States banknotes, so money.
Yeah.
They have so much physical currency. They've been collecting it for the past 30 years.
Right.
That if they just went in the United States and dumped all the cash that they have into the country, it would completely crash the economy.
Yeah.
They've been. Is that true? Do you know that?
I do not know.
That was somebody's. I need to look into that a little more.
I know we have too much debt held by China.
That's right.
And if they call us on it, we're in trouble. And I also know there were a couple of warning shots across the bow with I would call it credit agency or agencies that assess, the strength of the U.S. economy, and has threatened to downgrade it on the U.S. So something like that happens, with that much $36 trillion in debt, we could be in deep trouble.
Yeah, I just think it's interesting. But I want to go back to the DNC. So we were talking a little bit about some of the people that weren't there. Is it true that the Bushes are supporting Kamala Harris for president? I heard that they weren't at the RNC.
Yeah, they were not. Well, I didn't see them. I don't know. I've seen some folks that it's surprising to me that some folks who they've kind of come out publicly to support. You said DNC.
I meant the RNC.
No, it's okay. Can I talk, before I forget, can I talk to you about did you watch the DNC?
A little bit of it. I couldn't, it's so irritating. I should be honest. I really couldn't stand it, but I did watch
I'll
them.
be very honest. It was very, very hard to watch. It was very kind of fake.
Yes, it was very fake.
I love America, which, but a couple of things that kind of jumped out to me is the theme of existential climate crisis was missing. By and large.
I noticed that too from what I saw them talking about. They're even talking about fracking.
Right, and that kind of ties into the flip-flopping that I hope all Vermonters have realized, when Kamala Harris talks about now being in favor of fracking, being against universal health care, being in favor of border security, that's a huge flip. And then two things, did you see Senator Sanders' comment about that?
No.
Oh, yeah.
Was he upset about it?
No. He made comments very, very much to the effect of she's just being pragmatic to say the things that she needs to win.
Yeah, see, there you go.
And it was really unfortunate of a politician or any American to say something like that, because what he's saying is she's lying.
Yeah.
And she just wants to win. And then the other piece was, if you could, bring yourself to watch. I watched it each of the 4 nights some, but I wanted to make sure I saw. I think he might have spoke after Vermont did the roll call. Senator Sanders had a long speech.
He did.
Yes.
I didn't see that. He's not he thought he wasn't a Democrat.
Well, that's an interesting thing too, because they did. Kick him to the curb twice.
Yeah, like, why is he still there?
Right. So he had a long speech, and a couple of things about that. He talked about the current administration being the most accomplished since FDR. And I'm like, honestly, what planet are you on? I mean, I think the last 4 years have not been good. We have 40-year high inflation. We have 2 new wars, which are escalating. A lot of other things. So there's that one piece, and then at the end, disturbing to me, he talked much like Barack Obama did a long time ago about creating a different America.
Yeah.
And I hope folks, realize, America's already been created. We were created, the Declaration of Independence, basically support individual freedom and have a constitutional republic, and exactly. He didn't say what he was talking about exactly, but it's socialism and communism is what he's talking about. It's not going to work. But then, the one word he never mentioned. He spoke for about 12 minutes. You know what the one word he didn't mention was? Vermont.
He didn't.
No.
Haven't you noticed how? I was actually going to ask about that.
How little he's here?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I said, my mom. I told you this before. She went to an event. Bernie Sanders. So my mother's a teacher. She's part of teachers union, and he did a union event over in Barrie.
Okay.
Which I'm like, okay, when was the last time Bernie Sanders was in Barrie, Vermont? I don't know. Maybe he's there more often than I realized. But So she went to it. She loved it. And he asked the question to them. And I still put this out to Bernie Sanders. If you want to have this conversation, we can have this conversation. But he put out the question to them, why do you think, because it was realistically a group of teachers and moms and that kind, why do you think so many young Americans or young men in America support President Trump? Even here in Vermont. Why are there so many of these types of people? And I mean, I can answer that question, but why do you think that there's so many young Americans that support President Trump?
What do I think personally?
Yeah.
Well, I would say because President Trump actually loves America, and he believes in American value, and he is an example of someone that became very successful through hard work. And when we talked about making America great again, I think most Americans, hopefully all, but I think most Americans want that, and they see America right now as not in decline, frankly, and they don't like that. And
that's what I would say too.
It's a fact. Vermont men, young men, you probably know that throughout pretty much America's history, unfortunately, Vermont leads the nation in terms of making the ultimate sacrifice per capita during all of our wars.
I actually did know that.
Yeah. So Vermonters step up, they believe in our country, and there's a long history to that. I mean, Vermont, we were an independent republic here for 14 years, and I was just looking at the Vermont Constitution. It's 10 years older than the U.S. Constitution.
Yeah. It's pretty incredible.
It is, but and I think going back to his opponent, well, frankly, I hope Vermont, and like I said, I tried talking to folks, and the whole Trump thing you can't talk to a lot of Vermonters about it at all. So no. I don't spend a lot of time trying to, because you can't. But I think what happened 4 years ago was President Biden had diminished capabilities, and they put him in the basement.
Yes.
And kind of framed him as a moderate Democrat, and he came out guns a-blazing, far left as you can on day one. And I think we're sort of seeing that again now, and with the flip-flopping, and I don't know if she's done a real interview yet, or
she's done a couple, but nothing that's not staged,
pre-scripted press ones. So, and then if you watch even the debate, which clearly could have gone better for President Trump, I think she put on a good performance.
She did,
but the content was not there, and I think hopefully Americans are realizing that a word salad is not going to improve things.
No, I agree.
I think we're kind of fed up on that by now. But
it's the answer that I had to that question. This is what I told her. I was like, man, I wish I would have answered it for him. Would have said, I look around my state, and since I was born, really, it's been in decline. Since I was grown up, the school. The number of students in the school has gone down. The number of kids doing sports has gone down. The number of businesses in my town has disappeared. And this is over the last 30 years. Right. I mean, I'm 25, but I know that it's been happening. We're literally sitting in a building that used to be a Chevrolet dealership back when America was America. Now, especially in Vermont, it's becoming this postcard country club for, and that's not the whole country, but it's like the rest of the country might as well be some globalist, borderless economic zone where anybody can come in and pilfer if you have enough money.
I think what does resonate from President Trump, and I'm the same way, is to try to bring industry and manufacturing jobs back to America. So it's been a good 50, 60 years now, offshoring everywhere else, and there's some different reasons for that, but we can make America competitive again and bring jobs, because Vermonters are good at making things. They are.
Yes, they are.
Great history, Springfield and St. Johnsbury and other,
Barrie,
Rutland. So we can do that, but we've got to bring, got to entice jobs. Vermont's got is uphill, because I tell people I don't think anybody's walked into more businesses than I have in the last 3 years, because I walked
Yeah.
So anything resembling a city on down, top 20. I've gone in center of town and walked in every single open door and met the owner or someone that works there. And the common theme is leave me alone. I'm just too much regulation and cost. You're running me out of business. So Vermont is not business friendly. I want to work with our Republican governor and kind of turn that around. And one thing I actually just wrote a response on a survey was about taxes, and I'm trying to remember I think it was the corporate tax rate. I want to say that President Trump lowered to 21%, I think. And it was a little research, and before that, we were the highest in the world. So what he did was lower that to try to bring business back into the United States.
That's right.
I want to bring it back into Vermont. So getting back to the unsafe, unaffordable exodus, people leaving. I've talked a lot about going back to existential climate crisis. I met a lot of young people, a whole lot, that are very concerned about the climate. Okay. And future energy solutions and emissions. So I kind of take that energy and interest and have a what I call a semiconductor energy tech hub, maybe Greater Burlington, to develop, innovate and R&D technology solutions to make future energy, wind, solar, and electric, more reliable,
Absolutely.
more safe, more affordable. One part of that is disposal of safety first. I've seen some incidents where I actually posted one of a EV battery fire in Korea. I don't know if you saw it a few months ago. It was horrible.
I might not have seen that post specifically, but I did see one today. It's similar.
22 people died.
Wow.
Because but I want to take that energy and actually have a career path so someone can go to school here, go to UVM, and then have a well-paying job and raise a family here, as opposed to going to Florida or Texas or North Carolina.
Well, that's a funny point
else.
Because that's not even a concept to Vermonters. I mean, since I was growing up here as a kid, the whole idea was you're going to get out of here as soon as you possibly can. But I'm starting to learn that that's not how it is in other parts of the country or world, for that matter. You go to places. Everybody, I think, when you're young, you do want to go explore, which that's part of life.
Yeah.
But I think the idea that you have to leave isn't. It's not like that everywhere. It's not even close to like that everywhere. Right. But that's the way it is here.
Yeah. And so folks, I could share a little story with you. I mean, folks want to know, how I feel about Trump. I think he should be the next president based on policy. I think going back to 2019, he will lead the country to, a better place. I don't have concerns about some of the untrue things people say about what he might do. I don't even want to repeat some of the rhetoric that's out there.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
But I have a personal, President Trump endorsed me in 22.
Yeah, that's right. We want to talk about this a little bit. Yeah.
I spoke with him on the phone for 10 minutes solid, talking about my background. He said he wanted to endorse me. And then, without going into too much detail, a couple of things came up, and I actually requested from the former president if he would not put those in my endorsement.
Put what in?
Well, one was related to our governor, who didn't, vote for him.
Yeah.
So I was going to make some comments on that, and I asked the president not to do that, and he didn't. He agreed with me.
What did he want to say?
There were some words, but I'd rather not say. And then, frankly, election integrity. I told the truth is I voted for him in 16. I voted for him in 22. I watched that election. In 20. I watched that all day, all night, 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm pretty good with math. I'm with a calculator. I'm like, I think President Trump won.
Yeah.
3 o'clock in the morning. That's not the case. He didn't become the president. I acknowledge that. But so I told him that story, and he said, all right, I'm going to put some election integrity stuff in there. I'm like, I'm going to ask you don't do that, because Vermonters don't want to hear that. And he was like, all right, I won't do that. So I actually talked him out of doing two things. But and then I said, Mr. President, you get a minute? And I said, he's like, yeah, sure, what's up? So I went in the other room. My wife Stacy and my mother-in-law were in the kitchen, so we had a nice chat.
That's pretty special.
It was very, very nice, yeah. And so, and of course, him being at the RNC was great. I felt very good about the whole country at that point.
Yeah. Well, what do you think? Let me ask you a little bit about like RFK and his endorsement. What do you think of that whole team up? Do you appreciate it or?
So, I do appreciate it.
Yeah.
I appreciate it very much. And I appreciate. I've met several of a few times the RFK team here in Vermont.
Yeah.
And that was very encouraging. Very well received. But so I've actually said, and I've heard other people say this, but I'll say it, again, JFK.
Yeah.
I don't think he'd be a Democrat right now.
No, he would not be.
He'd probably be a moderate, Republican.
Center of right, maybe.
Yeah.
Or right of center, excuse me. Yeah.
And or left of center. Yeah.
Yeah.
And but for that for Kennedy to jump over to the Republican Party is huge. And like I told you, I'm from Boston. My parents were not into politics.
No,
at all.
My parents aren't either.
At all. I think my grandparents might have been. Well, I know they were. I've seen pictures of my grandparents on my mom's side, with Kennedys. So, but yeah, that's a big deal. And I think he's got some different ideas, but I think he's. Him and actually Elon Musk is another piece. Is bring some common sense and kind of not different perspectives that I think our government could use right now.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's funny that you bring up Elon too, because I think what we're seeing with this mashup of characters that were always kind of considered liberals, right? Like Elon, Joe Rogan, RFK, Jordan Peterson. Not necessarily Tucker. Tucker's always kind of been a hard right kind of guy. But to my point is there just seems to be this collaboration happening of people that don't always think the same way.
Yeah.
And I think that's huge. And when you look at the left, or the so-called left these days, it's unrecognizable. You don't even know, like it's just become this machine of woke ideology and climate hysteria and all the other social ideas. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I kind of, going back to the debate with President Biden and that meltdown, I kind of thought there would be that meltdown of the Democrat progressive left would continue. But like I said, I think unfortunately in the last debate with President Trump and Kamala Harris, that her performance has got some people thinking, that's the right answer, but it's paper thin. Like I said, the content's not there. So I will say, you mentioned folks that at the RNC, did you see the whole Hulk Hogan?
Yeah, of course.
That was a big deal. That was one of the better parts, because what he was saying, and I've kind of seen this in Vermont, where he was like, I'm tired of kind of holding my feelings in about how I really feel and who's the right person, and for different reasons. And when he did the shirt and the whole thing, and
Truman, you're on wild, bro.
that was pretty darn good. But I guess I was just talking about this yesterday. I did the Williston middle school. They have 20 years going on. They have all the candidates. So I went 2 years ago, and I met hundreds of 6th, 7th, 8th graders. Absolutely fantastic event. Give you a lot of hope for our youth. They did their homework. They did great signs. They asked tough questions. So I met all these folks, and I would have like teachers walk by me. It's like, I voted for you in the primary. I'm like, you don't have to.
Why do you have to?
You should be proud of that. That's your vote. So.
There's a much deeper point to what you're talking about.
You mentioned the NEA and the whole thing, and we'll hit it. So, I have nothing against unions. I'm not going to be the guy that goes in, the Republican that goes in and wants to bust up the unions. Better wages, better working environment, fine. And I work. In work, I work with unions and
of course
union contracts, and But we've got politicized, much like our DOJ, and it's gone too far. So we need to kind of bring it back over and focus on what a union is supposed to do. A union isn't supposed to be pushing an agenda that every teacher has to abide by.
No, I agree. I actually, the deeper point that I was getting at, I think is not necessarily about the unions, although that is part of it,
Yeah.
but more so like I always wondering just how much people base their views upon their fears of what others might think.
Yeah.
Even to the point where they'll even vote a certain way that they don't even understand why they're voting that way, but they want to be able to say to their peers, "Well, I voted for this person because they want to be accepted." They don't have to lie. And I'm beginning to wonder, just how many people out there are just operating on that level and not even on their own autonomy based on what they believe. And if everybody all of a sudden snapped out of it, which I don't know how possible that is, but. Well, do you know what I mean? I think everybody's under this spell. Like, they don't even realize it. They don't.
Yeah, there's. They
have to whisper to you, like, "Oh, I voted for you."
Right. Well, and I wish, frankly, around the state, I talk to folks, and Burlington comes up, and the typical response is, "I don't go to Burlington anymore."
I don't go to Burlington.
Vermonters, and so I do wish folks would actually see. The needles and the homeless and not see the crime, but I mean the crime's happening.
That's right.
I just visited neighborhoods. There was a shooting 2 doors down, and when I went, I went from New North down to Old North, walked straight through a lot of Old North yesterday and the day before, and I met some folks that were born there, lived there their whole life, and talked about the neighborhood used to be a lot better. That we didn't have this kind of crime. We definitely didn't have this. There was some drugs, but it wasn't something that was going to kill you.
It wasn't like this.
Yeah, and so it's in decline. But and then I meet a lot of folks, or a pretty good amount of folks. Like, 30 years ago Bernie did this. I'm like, it's 30 years ago. It's great. If he did something, and I even some of my ads, I talk about, maybe there's a point Bernie was a fighter, but
he was.
Yeah,
I think there's a big difference between pre-presidential election Bernie and post-presidential election Bernie. Like there was the local Bernie, and then there was the international Bernie.
Yeah,
and I think that we've lost touch with him here in Vermont. I think we have, but people still vote for him. I mean, I think it's just because he's Bernie. That's it. They don't even have a reason.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I'm going, all over the state. I think Vermonters have realizing that we're not going in a good direction. I think the governor is exactly right. Unaffordable, unsafe. People are leaving. I talked with Lieutenant Governor Zuckerman. He talked about people coming in, and we're not really losing people. I'm like, no, you really are. 18 to 50, you're like, I'm leaving, or I'm.
Well, it's the type of people coming in. That's what he's not thinking about. It's like, okay, the sheer numbers, sure, maybe there's people coming here, but are they producing jobs? Are they adding to the economy? Are they doing anything other than buying a big piece of property in the middle of the woods that nobody else can afford? I'm dead serious. Like, what value do they have? Kids here? Are they? And I think if we were to really look at the numbers, we're losing all the young people. Literally, we actually are number one in the country for export of young people, and I don't see any new businesses coming here, and the ones that do, why?
They never will. I did a little research when I think it was Richard Tarrant ran against Bernie when Bernie was running first time to be a senator. Mr. Tarrant, in his concession speech, he said, "Okay, Vermont, just let you know, with a socialist senator, businesses are not going to come to Vermont." And I think he was very largely was right about that, and you mentioned education again. The cost is it's pretty much out of control here in Vermont.
Oh, it's out of control.
I think we're a close second in the country, I believe.
We're number one. I don't know what's your stat you're getting.
Yeah, a couple months ago, I think we were second. We might be number one. Right.
Yeah, I think we're number one.
27 or 28K.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
4.4 per student. I think they have per student the ratio, ratio teachers to students is 4 to 1.
Yeah. So I think parents and the legislature needs to take a hard look at it. And a personal point, going around, for instance, I've met separately, different times, active duty, like Army recruiters in Barrie, and I've met a National Guard recruiter. I can't remember, I met her, Randolph, I think. But they both relayed to me that there's been an increase in young people in Vermont not passing what's called the ASVAB, which is the standardized test to join the armed services. So there's a minimum threshold where you can go right into the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, or Space Force, and they're not hitting that level. That's a bad sign.
That's pretty scary.
Because that test is not it's not the SATs. I mean, it's not. Vermonters should be able to go to public school and pass that test.
So here's my question for you then. How long does this go on in Vermont? If let's imagine things don't change in November. We have the same makeup in the legislature, same makeup in the federal government. Hopefully Trump wins, but even if that happens, let's say it goes even further to the left. What's the breaking point for folks? Because I don't. How are they affording the stuff that, like the property tax, for example? What kind of money do these people have?
Well, food costs.
Yeah.
I go grocery shopping. I was just telling somebody, I mean, milk $5 a half gallon, whatever, and I was going to buy some English muffins the other day. It was like $5.79 for a little pack of, one pack. So the food costs. And I actually talk about 23 was super majority. So 23 strike one, 24 strike two, 25 could be strike three for Vermont. I think because we're already looking at I think they're saying 7%.
Yeah, no,
which means 10%.
It's more, I think,
average
for the property tax. Are you talking? Yeah,
right. And
it's more.
So we absolutely need change, and we need common sense. And I thank Bill Huff and a lot of other people for putting together the Get Real platform, common sense ideas to get Vermont back on track. We all love Vermont. That's why I love it. I
do too.
Love it, and I don't know if you've been. We'll have you over sometime. I look out at Escutney, and
it's beautiful.
And I love all the people too. I Vermont Daily. I wrote an article about being at a crossroads, and it goes way back, for the whole Playboy article and that of taking Vermont and changing it. Read the Vermont Daily.
It must have been an old.
It was like July.
Okay.
Read an article I sent in. Guy published it.
I'm sure. So I'll find it.
Playboy article of to take a state and kind of take it over, but the idea it could be a petri dish for ideas from the people to improve and could be tested out in California or other places.
I'll definitely go read that.
And that idea is not bad, but it's gone off the rails.
Yeah, it's
because
gone.
Now it's not about better ideas. It's about kind of an agenda but the interesting thing, I'll tell you kind of an interesting backstory on that is a couple of law students at Yale wrote an article called Jamestown 70 in 1970, and it was describing that what I just explained to you, a state taken over. I think it might even name Vermont as being one of the possible 7 or 8. And so I was writing this article. I tried to get in touch with the people that wrote those 2 articles, and then I got later that after I sent out some emails, and later that afternoon I got a phone call from Tennessee. It's calling me from Tennessee. It was the author of the first article, Jamestown 70.
Wow.
Yeah. So I had sent him an email, said, please get in touch with me. I wanted to ask you something. So, pick up the phone. I'm like, hello, Professor Bloomstein. And he's like, yeah. He's like, I already gave to your campaign. I'm like, that's not why I'm calling you, why I emailed you. It was very strange. And he actually said, I have some regret about writing that article because it's caused something like Vermont to kind of go off the rails and go too far on that idea.
Wow.
Yeah. And
that's really interesting.
It was very interesting. And he told me, he's like, do you know who put in a lot of the angry rhetoric in that article? I was like, no. He's like, Hillary Rodham. I was like, no way. He's like, yeah, law school student with me. I was like, oh my gosh. So it's very,
Holy cow.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah. And he was very nice. So, yeah, I think, Vermont's, like I said, kind of go from, here to way over here. And it's, the ideas, have new ideas from the people and, for to improve things, great. But it's gone too far.
No, I couldn't agree more, and it's a shame. I don't know if you saw, I blasted the governor on X and Facebook a couple weeks ago. It's just basically saying, like, hey, tell people to vote Republican, please. Like, we're all, I think that there's a certain level of, especially in his position, being the governor of Vermont, you're more than just a party figure. You're a leader for the state. So he has a responsibility to try to represent everybody. I understand that. And he does have people across the parties voting for him. But you got to try to be honest with the people of Vermont and recognize the fact that, as governor, even the people that you've appointed to the legislature that were Democrats, they vote against you.
Right.
You handpicked them. So how do we get, and this is a question to you and to him ultimately too, if you're not going to say vote Republican, how are we going to do anything in the state? I don't understand how we fix the problem.
I'll say it. Vote Republican.
Yeah, I will too.
And I just watched something very, very recently with the governor. I don't think he used the word Republican. I think
he said common sense. I think.
Yeah, which is what the Get Real platform is. I hope he'll strengthen that a little bit because, and I think he sees that 12 vetoes overridden. That he's not getting that, team play from
anybody,
the left at all.
No.
And we talked about that state senator going in and seeing, the last couple of years that you go to Montpelier and expect to work through a common sense solution of both sides. And I get it. There's a majority, so maybe we'll be over here on the left a little bit, but pegged. Without any kind of discussion.
Sure.
Things are not up for discussion at all. It's a one-way street. So.
No, it absolutely is. And I think he knows that, sees it very clearly. I just don't understand the hesitancy to say, we got to do something different, folks, vote Republican. And just to say, quickly, the connection to, I don't understand how so many Vermonters don't make the connection. A lot of Vermonters realize, okay, we have problems in the State House, and it's maybe because of the Democrats and progressives. Some people are starting to go down that path. I take my parents as a good example. They're what the heck's going on? But they don't then take the connection and say, okay, so this is the problem with a supermajority of Democrats in Vermont. Why would we elect somebody like Kamala Harris to president of the United States if this is the if all of them took over, this is what we're dealing with? And Waltz. Yeah, I mean, and he is like far.
That's the first thing I did. I had a hockey line mate from West Point who's from White Bear Lake, lives in Minneapolis. And I was like, what do you think? He said, well, he ruined Minnesota.
That's right.
Ruined Minneapolis. I was like, all right, enough said. But
fail up, right?
I have it's challenging for me because I think what's going on with the, folks in Vermont equate Republican Party with Donald Trump. And I'm not running for, I tell people, I'm not running for president. I don't want to be president. I want to be your U.S. senator and represent you and actually get results for you that you're not getting. But there's that equation there. So
it is a reality.
Keep working through it and trying to talk to people. But
it's all they have, though. And if you're somebody like John Rogers, for example, running for lieutenant governor, Democrat for 16 years in the state house as a state rep and state senator, he's found that because he does not support Donald Trump, and some of the social issues he's probably pretty liberal on, but it seems to me that all Democrats have in this state, this is all they're talking about. They're talking about Donald Trump and why he's so bad. They're talking about abortion, and they're talking about climate change.
Yeah.
All three of those things are global/international issues.
Right.
They're not talking about anything that has to do with their local politics.
Yeah.
And that's the disconnect that I'm seeing. And so when, as a Republican, you're running for office and you tell people, yeah, I support Trump for president, or no, I don't, but well, how could you be associated with that? How could you, it's like this total derangement. I mean, the Trump derangement syndrome is a real thing. And so for
I
Phil,
didn't want to say the 3 words, but yeah, it's out there.
It's a real thing.
Admit it. Yeah,
it's a real thing. I mean, I'm some degree on both ends of the spectrum. There's some people that are so hardcore Trump that they can't even have a conversation with somebody who doesn't support Trump.
Yeah.
But then you have on one end where it's like you can't. Okay, so if I say vote Republican, that doesn't necessarily mean I want the president to be. I don't know. I do anyway. But
well, you brought up one of the key points, abortion, and to me it's a state issue.
That's right.
Period. And I've said many times it comes up to the if I'm a U.S. senator, it comes up to the U.S. Senate. I'm not going to approve sweeping legislation either way. It's a state issue, so I will keep it a state. And as Supreme Court decided that, I think rightfully so, based on the Constitution, which is their job. I think specifically the 10th Amendment, that power should go to the states. And it's controversial, I know. I tell you one thing, in all the threat to democracy talk, going back to the State of the Union, I certainly didn't appreciate that our president during the State of the Union was berating the Supreme Court about, I'm going to overturn Roe v. Wade decision. And I'm like, no, you're not. We have a Constitution. And so I think there's been a little bit of that's something I think people should be kind of alarmed about, to him even just saying that. And never mind berating the Supreme Court during a State of the Union.
Yeah.
Which is why few and fewer, that's why you only had 3 of them there, because if the president's going to, don't even go.
Well, and I think that's the interesting that you bring that up too, talking about berating the Supreme Court, Trump being a threat to democracy, all this talk, and it's like everything they say is projection. Everything they say is projection. Yeah. You look at them. They're literally shooting at the president. They're shooting at Trump, right?
Yeah.
They are cooing the president, so he can't even be the nominee. It's like, how could you say that? And that's what I just don't understand it. I really don't understand it. When I look around the state and people, especially when they're talking to local candidates and they talk about how, they bring up Trump and him being a threat to democracy. Meanwhile, we have these crazy issues here in Vermont. It has nothing to do with that.
Right.
And then it's also like, well, if I were to argue, your point's wrong because the party that you're supporting doesn't even let people vote in their primaries. Yeah. It does. I just don't get it. But I guess I'm preaching to the choir.
Well, yeah. I mean, they're grasping and trying to cling on to. I think there's a lot of folks that like what the supermajority is, which is running Vermont right into the ground.
Yeah.
And you mentioned, I think there's some folks that have a different view of the future for Vermont, and that doesn't include a lot of native Vermonters.
No, I was having a conversation with 2 people that are running for local office down in Windsor, Orange County, and I said, listen, guys, you got to get this through your head. This is how they think. A lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them. They think that everything's terrible. Donald Trump's a dictator. The climate is going to kill us all in 10 years or less. So there's really no long-term planning. There's no reason to make a long-term plan unless it's climate change, something to do with climate change. Because even if we do that, then even that might not work. So it's like, what's even the point? Like, why? So I was trying to get this through their head. Like, this is how they think down there.
And it's
there's no fixing the education problem when you think the world's going to end in 10 years.
Well, it was disturbing to me to go to different schools and meet a 4th grader. Walks up to me and said, "What am I going to do about the existential climate crisis?" I was like, I don't know if we're in an existential climate crisis. And be like, no one had ever said that to him before. It's like, you should do your own research. And sometimes I talk to him about the 3 billion trees that are here that are consuming more carbon, CO2 than we're emitting, and we're at the bottom. We're number 50, by like twice compared to any other state. And by the way, the whole Green New Deal and EV vehicles has some major climate impacts that we're not really thinking about, including disposal of the 135 million 2,000-pound toxic rare earth batteries.
Yes.
So
that's going to cause a bit of a problem.
So there's a lot of things to consider, but technology, American way, ingenuity, Vermonters, we can work through all that. We can't just flip on the switch real soon and spend $93 trillion like the Green New Deal would have us do. And
especially with the debt.
Yeah, right. Well, the debt. And
I just want to make a quick point. I think you just made a really important point about the billions of trees, 3 billion trees in the state of Vermont.
Right.
Let's just go back in time a little bit. Before the advent of the combustion engine and oil and gasoline, they were cutting down all the trees in Vermont. Yeah. Every single one of them for heating, heating homes, for building, for I think steam power was a big part of why they had to cut down all the trees for the steam engines. And there was no trees at one point in the entire state.
Yeah.
And then oil and gasoline came along, and they stopped doing that, right? So then now take it down to today. Okay, so we have all these trees, but we want to clear cut entire, huge amounts of acreage to put in solar panels, and then we want to blast the tops of mountains and put wind turbines on the top of them. Right. So talk about environmental degradation, and then on top of that, you're right. Where these things are being produced in China and the type of energy they're using, it's a scam.
Well, there's even another piece to it, because with the advent of AI and data analytics, and you hear about these computing farms and massive, maybe even not too distant future doubling energy requirements to support that. And part of that is to be competitive, in the global economy. The wind, solar, electric. That's why I talk about reliable, affordable, and safe. And reliable is a big part of that. So if the wind's not blowing or if it's cloudy, and I think there's a lot of Midwest states that have, made decisions to shut down plants and get rid of nuclear. And I think the day is coming where they're going to realize they don't have a backup, and it's too hot or too cold, and going to be in bad shape.
Well, yeah, I'm the type of person that's like, I don't believe that we should limit ourselves to any one specific power source or energy resource or anything like that. We should have a plethora of options and innovative ideas.
All the above, like Manchin said. I met Senator Manchin. He's impressive.
Oh, really? Yeah, what state is he?
He's West Virginia.
Okay.
And I don't know, technically he was a Democrat. He might be an independent now or something.
I think he left.
And he said he's not going to run again. I actually thought he was going to make a presidential run, but I heard him speak at a Calvin Coolidge conference down in D.C.
Okay.
And he was very good, very common sense, and he mentioned all the above, which is great. That is what, and that gets back to center compromise and common sense, as opposed to far left, our way, the highway.
Yeah, no, and tell me if I'm wrong, but kind of sounds like what you're describing is he had maybe similar views to Robert Kennedy Jr. I mean, when RFK came up and spoke at the Ethan Allen Institute, you said you were there for that.
No, that I did not go to.
Okay, you were not there for that. Okay, well, he spoke a lot about his ideas for energy, and he was pretty blunt. Like, we don't need to cut out one industry or the other. Everybody can eat, it doesn't have to be, and actually we're better off if we open the gates and just let people. But I mean, not just, we want regulation, we want safety, but at the end of the day, I mean, we shouldn't just cut off all the pipelines and everybody's still driving oil-powered vehicles. It doesn't make any sense. It's like, well, I don't know. We've been going for about an hour and 10 minutes here.
I can add one thing I think I can also impact very positively. From West Point in the military, I served boots on the ground, Europe, Asia, Persian Gulf, Middle East, on the ground. I was actually part of foreign policy to produce peace, and we don't have that right now. We've got failure in our foreign policy, and I link Ukraine and the Middle East to the United States and the Afghanistan withdrawal, and the previous president cut off the funding to Iran. Iran funds Hezbollah, Hamas, Houthis. Current administration turned that spigot back on, and now we have October 7th happen, which was a terrorist attack. So, but I look to impact foreign policy that produces peace, and it's very important.
That's what I was actually going to say. We haven't talked any really about your background, and as a West Point grad, you have been boots on the ground overseas, so you have seen firsthand how American foreign policy affects Americans, and not just Americans, but the rest of the globe. So, and currently now, you've talked a little bit about what you do for work.
Yeah.
Maybe you could share a little bit of that and how that would affect.
The last, so retired, worked a couple of years for the Department of Defense, then in the same organization was a defense coordinating element. So I worked across federal, state, local, across DHS, HHS, but and then a couple of years as a contractor for Lockheed Martin.
Okay.
But then went into business development. I got an MBA while I was still on active duty and worked business development, worked for several companies, large and small. But I lead efforts to engage government customers, mostly military, mostly the Army, and then go into a competitive bidding environment. I lead an effort to write a big technical proposal and pricing proposal. It's extremely price competitive for services. So that's if the Army needs 50 people to do an engineering work to develop a radio system, I'll bid in that with maybe 10 other companies. Very price competitive. So I've been doing that for about 13 years now, and I've grown, been very successful growing jobs and business for the companies that I work for. I have relationships literally across hundreds of businesses. So and to include in AI and cybersecurity and other technology fields. So I know I know I can bring businesses and jobs from them to Vermont.
Sure.
And I want to do that. And like I said earlier, I think work with our Republican governor, make Vermont more business friendly. And I'm not talking about becoming, the Jersey Turnpike and pollution.
No.
I'm talking about technology and innovation jobs. And there's a little start of it in Burlington. You go by the Whale's Tails in there. There's some companies in
it's
there.
coming. It's coming.
I've talked to folks with Beta Technologies. I've talked with OnLogic. I've talked with a bunch of other companies. I've been to the Tech Jam. You ever been to
No.
You should go. It's good. A lot of companies, a whole lot, have exhibits there. So I know. It kind of gets back to meeting, young Vermonters and seeing that interest in developing solutions, particularly for energy. And we have, Global Foundries with a major presence for semiconductors. So I think we can expand off that, add in energy solutions development, and make outside Burlington.
I really like that idea.
A place where as a tech hub.
Yeah.
Absolutely can happen.
I agree.
Not going to happen with a socialist senator.
Nope.
But it can happen. I know I could be a big part of that.
No, I think that's a great point. So you know what it's like to be in a competitive environment. Can you name some of the companies that you work with, or is that not?
I work for a small business Alaska Native company now.
Okay.
I've worked for Raytheon.
Okay.
I've worked for a company that just did all they did was AI services.
Okay.
For a few years. Very interesting field. Some of it works, some of it doesn't work. But I tell you, the stuff, robotic process automation, it works. And, humans, the idea is to take humans and have them make, upper level decisions. But things where a human is, doing a process, you can put in the machines. It's really just machines mimicking humans.
Yes.
Is what AI is. So,
yeah.
You can have them do the same thing, not make any mistakes, not need a break, 24/7.
Now I see what you're getting at with the energy problem.
Oh, right.
Yeah, that's going to be a huge thing. That's going to be a huge thing.
And then kind of developing the algorithms to support that. And the machine learning, I actually did a lot of work at Aberdeen Proving Ground. So there's different Army organizations there, Army Research Lab, and they're making some incredible advancements in robotics with AI so that you have robots that can do just about anything.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible stuff. It's also kind of terrifying.
Yeah.
I'm sure you know that too. But we got to be on the forefront of it because that's where things seem to be headed in this day and age. We do have a couple comments from Mike King. Mike King, I think he writes this in reference to Phil Scott. Not very kind of you to write this, but he writes, is lapdog one word? On the noise about USSC, good job. What was he talking about there? USSC?
USSC, United States Senate. I'm not sure.
I don't either. I don't know. Sorry, Mike. We don't know what that means. But then he writes finally, "Deploy Malloy!" exclamation point. So
thank you.
Yeah, he's got you got a fan out there watching today.
Well, I will say, an RNXG name, we're one team, and we are going to lead Vermont back on a better path than we are right now.
I think that's a wonderful thing. Is there anything else you want to add today, or are you ready to wrap this up?
This has been great, Paul, and thank you again for doing this. No, it's I'm all over the state. I'm heading down to Jacksonville, way down the south part.
Jacksonville, Vermont?
Yeah.
I didn't even know that was the place.
I'm going down to Whitingham, way down south.
Yeah, actually, you're going there for a forum.
Yeah.
Guy Page will be there.
Right. Guy will be there. And so I'm going there, and I was in Vermont, Burlington this morning, and so I'm kind of all over the place, but it's great meeting Vermonters, and I think Vermonters realize it is time for change. It's time for balance. Governor talks about that too, and we have become unaffordable and unsafe and a place to live. I want to change that. I love Vermont. We can have a much better future. My opponent talks about the struggle continuing. It doesn't have to continue. We can be a prosperous state, and we're not right now. We're a lot of parts to it. The border, being business friendly, peace on earth. I pray for it every day. So a lot of things that I can impact as a senator, and I will. And, the last thing I talk about sometimes is, we talk about Bernie not being around very much. I've already pledged, and I will. I'll go to each of the 14 counties if I'm U.S. Senator, and I will spend hours-long Q&A, and I've done that all over the state for 3 years now, but Vermonters will get a chance to meet me in person. I'll hear their issue. I'll actually act on it. That's not happening now.
No, it isn't.
Not even close. So Vermonters deserve a lot more. They deserve results, not just a lot of false promises.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for coming down here today, Gerald. I wish you the best of luck going forward. I know that you are putting in the work, and you have been for the past couple of years.
Right, yeah.
And I know how hard that is. I know how tough some of these conversations can be.
I do want to say thank you to my wife, Stacy, and family, and all the folks that have been helping me. Absolutely unbelievable. Volunteers and team, and just great all over the state. So thank you.
That's what it comes down to, right? The team that you have. Thank you, everybody, so much for tuning in. This has been an episode of Creemee Cast live from Bean Studios in Northfield, Vermont. I hope you have a wonderful, Thursday evening. Come on down and have a Creemee. I know the weather's still kind of cold. And if you're not currently a subscriber or supporter of the Vermont Daily Chronicle, please hit that subscribe button on the YouTube page and head on over to our actual website and become a sustaining subscriber at Vermont Daily Chronicle for just 30 cents a day. You can support free speech right here in Vermont for just 30 cents a day, $9 a month.